Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. This is our 39th session. As I said, um, we are really pleased with how everything goes, and we are really excited for getting into our 40th session next week. So it is very exciting times for us. For those who are the first time joining our knowledge series session, please let us know in the chat box that if this is the first time you're joining us today. And for those who don't know me, my name is Susan Smiley, and I'm the founder of TCAE. I have been working in regulatory and financial crime compliance for the past 15 years. And my passion is to educate and help many of our compliance and AML professionals around the world. So with that passion came with a lot of responsibilities. And that's why I created TCAE, to help connect and educate and empower all our professionals. And I'm sure that many of you are aware of many of our services that we provide. But let me just share with you a couple of them. The knowledge series session that you guys are right now part of, it has been starting from the beginning of the pandemic, March 2020, and we have been having that, nonstop for the past year and so. We have created study groups for our professionals who are seeking for CAMS or CFCS certifications. And so we are assisting them with their certificates. And we have also created a talent hub where we are helping the professionals and talents, to find the right opportunities, and some of them their dream jobs. And with that, we are also introducing a job board where we are gonna put all the jobs that are available in Canada and US in our industry. So that could help you to apply for them, whenever you want. And for our crypto enthusiasts, we have also partnered up with Chainalysis. I'm sure many of you have seen the launch of it. We are very pleased with that. We had a lot of people signing up, and we are so excited for it. We partner up with Chainalysis to offer their fundamentals and also reactor course, which is very exciting. So make sure you follow our LinkedIn page, and as well as visit our website, become part of our members community. We have a lot of things to offer. We have a lot of new initiatives and new courses coming up. So stay tuned for all the announcements. And let's go to today's session. I'm sure that you're all very excited for today's session, we selected the topic of the risk tolerance, and I'm sure that many of you as money laundering professionals, know that understanding the AML risk in the organization, it is a very significant task that you have to do. And finding the right balance always to find and manage these risks and helping the growth of the business is kind of an art. So with that, we have a great speaker today, and an honorary for us, Jennifer Green. She is actually very well known in Canada. For those who are outside of Canada, you need to get to know her more. She is an amazing and a legend here, so everyone knows her pretty well. And she's a partner at GT, Grant Thornton, and she's her practicing area is forensic investigation and money laundering. And right now she's leading the risk and forensic practice for the firm. I will I will give the floor to her to tell more about herself to us. And with that, Jennifer, I'm passing the floor to you to just introduce yourself and tell more about you.
Okay, thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, that's perfect.
Okay, terrific. So sorry for the, immediately getting connected blip or a little bit of stress on my side, but it's very nice to be connected now and join this group this morning. Thank you all for your time and coming, and thank you, Suzanne, for reaching out. It was a couple of months ago, or maybe not even that long ago, and just starting the conversation. And I've been watching kind of your journey and the journey of this group and this community, and really pleased to see it all developing and how the people come together and support one another, and how you're supporting the community. It makes a big difference to me. And maybe that's part of how I can maybe introduce myself. I've been doing this work now. It's a long time, like it's almost 25 years. It's hard to believe I'm getting that much older, and some might think wiser. I feel like I'm learning every day. And in this space where I've been doing AML work, I continue to learn and see things. And so that's part of what I want to do and bring here today. So my whole introduction to investigations and proceeds of crime and money laundering started about 25 years ago when I did a 2-year secondment with the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. And as a young accountant, I was a CPA, so I was a designated accountant, who thought I knew a lot. And learned pretty quickly. I was just beginning the journey to learn every day. I was embedded in a investigative unit in Canada. It was in Ontario, and worked directly with the investigators who worked on proceeds of crime cases. So it was organized crime. It was mostly drug trafficking that they were investigating. And I sat right beside them in the rooms. It really was like a movie for an accountant, the kind of movies that they started making today. And my job was to learn. I was learning a whole lot, but I was helping them follow the money, right? So they would have this case, they had undercover evidence, they were following the substantive issues, where the drugs were, who the people, who touched it, who were the buyers and the sellers. And I was following all the money transactions on top of that and helping them understand, okay, I need these bank accounts, and then this money moved over here, and we got to go follow that. And the production orders and going into the banks, going into the institutions and following the money and getting all of this evidence. And this was a long time ago. This was the late 90s, 1990s, and then pulling all of that together to tell the financial story. So for me, I was learning, and for them, I was one of the, not the very first, but one of the earlier. There were 10 of us across Canada at the time put inside these units to help learn about putting the forensic accounting, the financial investigator right beside the police investigator. And I got to testify in court on those cases, on a few of the ones that I worked on. Most of the cases I worked on, and still many times today, a lot of the cases they're pled guilty. So often the forensic accountant doesn't get to testify, but that was my introduction. And then I came back to the firm, I came back to Grant Thornton, and I have been really fortunate to work to have a really wonderful learning and career with lots of different people. And I lead a team of people, the forensic AML team. We do a lot of work in the market, and I've been doing that for a while. So that's a little bit about me. I would like the group to know that I, particularly in the AML space, there's so much in front of us today. We've in Canada and lots of places around the world, we have more and more rules. I actually asked one of our lawyers that I was on a panel with on Wednesday, do we have any other part of our regulated world that's as detailed, layers of regulatory rules and detail? We sort of say, oh, we have this risk-based approach, but so much is prescribed. Is there anything else that's like this? And the answer is, maybe a couple of things in the bank system around how banks have to handle complaints as they come in. But really, and this community that we are, AML, and all the work that we have to do, it's really intricate. So in this world where I lead a team now at GT where we do a lot of anti-money laundering reviews. So we go in and we have to test how things are done. We help build programs. We help groups after the regulator comes in and they have to remediate. So we do a lot of AML work. But and your question, Suzanne, it was in there, why are we talking about this today? Because when we first sat down, Suzanne said to me, she said, well, what do you want to talk about? And I said, well, what do you want me to talk about? And she said, no, 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 no. What do you want to talk about? And I said, well, I'd really like to try to talk about understanding risk tolerance. So this is something that I want the group to know I'm still learning about this with the clients that I work with. But I'd say it's been the last 2, 3, maybe 4 years where I'm starting to work with senior teams at the clients that I get the chance to work with to really talk about this now, because we have these AML programs, we have rules, we've got, all the different elements, and we've got risk assessments, we have all of this stuff, but what are we really doing, and how is this really, how are we designing and building this to really do what we need it to do? And what I'm finding is that the space, the time that we have to, I think, talk about what I've tried to title up here today, we often don't have this space and time. Like I have struggled. That's, if I've been doing this for 25 years, I'm only just starting to have these conversations with my client now. And part of that's my learning and my maturity as a professional. But part of it is that a lot of our clients are not, you want to, I have to get a lot of AML stuff done every single day and every month and every few months and every year. And I have all of this stuff to do. And by the way, we just got new regulations. And then by the way, we got guidance about the new regulations and the dates are being pushed out. Like the level of complexity that we're dealing with, it's just, and you want to have a conversation on risk tolerance? Like, so I'd like to start for us as the AML community to have some more time and space to talk about tolerance and what we're really trying to do here. So we're here today. So thanks. So I think we get going, Suzanne. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Feel free to go.
Free to go. Okay. So let's see if this slide works. Okay. So this is a slide that I added after some of the initial conversations with Suzanne, because when she saw the title, she said, okay, Jennifer, so you're doing a good job, Suzanne, right? She said, okay, so what does risk tolerance really mean? We better tell this to the group. And how is this different than risk appetite? And what does risk mean? And so you asking those questions to me gave me a little bit of time to think about that. And why did I use the word risk tolerance? And I don't think you helped me go through my process a little bit more deliberately. I think risk tolerance is the right word that I wanted to use in the title and for the kind of space and discussions that I think more of us in the AML community need to drive, whether we're at the entity trying to do this stuff, whether we're investigating it, whether we're a consultant. But let's make sure we have some of these terms in front of us so we know we're all on the same page, right? So what is risk? It's all over the place. It's all around us, right? So for me, it's really, risk is about uncertainty. It's something we don't know what's going to happen. There's a possibility that it can happen, and it's future oriented. And there's risks that we know about. I don't know if it's going to happen, but I know that might happen. And there's stuff that we don't know about, right? There's risk out there that I don't know about, but it's about uncertainty. Okay. And I think, does that coming through, Suzanne? Because I think you had even some more question for me on that.
Yes, I think that, that is a great example of the risk. And just to also add to it, I think Giles, who is in your team, and I think he's in the audience as well, and Peter Warwick, they all had a conversation, and this is credited to Peter Warwick and as well Giles, who shared the story with us during one of our study groups. And Giles was saying that I was on the elevator and I was just with Peter, and Peter just asking, well, Giles, what is risk? And Giles was guarded just by the question, and it's a very easy question, and he was just answered the question, and then Peter came up with a definition that it really resonated with him. So I want to share, Giles, if with your consent, I'm going to share that. And that was the definition that Peter said to him, was that risk is making decision without appropriate information on which to make informed decision. So that means basically if you don't have the right information, you can't understand the risk and therefore you can't manage the risk properly. So I think understanding, for example, the products and services and the nature of the business is the key first step. And that is very important, I think, first step for us, to understand.
I think that aligns. And you said that was an easy question. I think it was an easy question to ask. I don't think it's an easy
Yeah,
question. It's the kind of thing you could spend hours on, right? Like
absolutely.
what is risk? I think that maybe what I have up here on the slide is a bit more of, pulled back a little bit from what Peter and Giles have shared, which I agree with. But I think it's pretty simplistic for me. It's about uncertainty and the possibility that something could happen. And some of that, what I bring to that is my accountant training, because as an accountant, you have to account for things, and some things some things could happen or might happen or didn't happen, and we get a lot of training on that. And then how you choose to inform yourself is critical. I agree. I think it lines right up. So we got risk. So then Suzanne said, okay, so we're calling this, what's your risk tolerance? Well, what the heck is risk appetite? Like, are they the same thing? What's appetite? What's tolerance? Like, and that was interesting for me to think about. I did a bit of searching to see what the internet says. That's what my kids say, right? It's what the internet says, Mom, must be right. But it caused me to think a little bit about why, in certainly my part of the AML community, we use the word tolerance a lot. Like we don't, and I think it's because I think the actual language, the actual words go over better. When I'm talking with the senior team and I'm talking about risk tolerance, I can work with that. But nobody has an appetite for money laundering risk, right? If I say, what's your risk appetite? What's your appetite for money laundering risk? Well, I don't have any. There is none, right? So there is in the actual words, and maybe how we use them or understand them in Canada. That might be different in other parts of the world, but kind of the intent of those words, I think might hold true when you're in that governance kind of role. Nobody's going to come to the table and say, okay, I've got some appetite for money laundering risk, right? So I think in professional risk training and language, and I'm not one of those people. I'm a forensic accountant and I'm an AML specialist, but I'm not a certified risk specialist. I think that appetite, if we look at some of the authoritative language, that appetite is more at a business level. It's more macro level comment. What is our appetite as a business to go out and take on some risk in regards to whatever, not necessarily money laundering and terrorist financing. And then risk tolerance, it's more precise, it's more detailed. We're looking at more specifics. So we've got more data. And you go back to what Giles and Peter were talking about, how well have we informed ourselves? And once we start to inform ourselves, we can figure out, or we have the opportunity to, if we choose to have what our tolerance is around certain things. Okay, I think both of them, I think that's the last point that I've got up on here, both appetite and tolerance. If we put in some effort to understand what our own and what the organization's appetite or tolerance is, it's going to help us understand what we want, what we will do, what we won't do, and then maybe what we should do and could do as we build the AML program. And that's what I want to try to get to through some of this session today, right? Like if we can understand where a group that leads an organization, the governance, the senior management, the owners, the board of directors said, look, we're on the low end or we're on the higher end, or, we have a bit more openness to risk or absolutely no way. Well, what does that mean when we have to think about the details of the AML program, the actual, how we build out processes, how we write up policy, how we affect decisions on the front lines? What does that mean in an AML program? I don't have all the answers to that, but maybe have some things to put the thinking on the table.
That's great. I think Clarice asked a very nice question. She's saying risk is inherent in all type of business and industry. What would be the first step towards understanding risk? How to balance and mitigate this issue?
Oh, that's one of those, very good questions to ask, not so easy to answer. What's the first step? Well, I want to share, again, I'm not a certified risk professional, but I think, and I see it, and we do it, we execute it on the work that we do for AML. One of the first steps is you've got to inform yourself, right? So we're going to go right back to what Giles and Peter told us. We've got to inform ourselves as to the risks. And if you're starting with general statements, of course, yes, there's risk in everything you do, whether so if we're going to go open up, maybe we're a bank or a credit union, or let's pick a kind of regulated entity. If we have a new product or service, or we have a new market that we want to target, say we're going to go into a new community and open up a branch. Well, okay, so how can we get to the details of what risk is in there? So I think a first step is sitting down and saying, okay, well, what's the risk around the clients or the members? What's the risk of the geography? What do we know and don't know about that community? We've got to get down to that detailed level and understand the potential for risk. What is the possibility? Like, what is it? And we've got through different forms of guidance, both in Canada and around the world, that tell us for sure the parts that we have to include in that informing. So Clarissa, I forget her name. We've got to inform ourselves about the specific types of risk. We got to get detailed. I think that's my response. We got to get detailed in understanding risk.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
We keep going?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so let's have a little bit of a conversation about, because these two kind of get mixed up for me all the time. In our world of AML, again, we've got to get detailed, right? So we're talking about money laundering and terrorist financing. I've just got money laundering up there. And right beside it, intertwined, it's all complex. We have compliance, regulatory risk. And often, I think we don't, and when I say often, I'm speaking from my experience with the different clients that I work with. Lots of different wonderful people, big businesses, big institutions, banks, smaller entrepreneurial financial services, MSBs and fintechs, like such a spectrum. We don't always give ourselves enough time, particularly when we've got smaller teams, when smaller organizations, to think about the difference between these two. And when we're talking about risk and what our response might be and what our appetite or tolerance might be, it's pretty different once you break these two out. Okay, so let me know if the group can see this. So this slide here is, let's just think for a moment about our appetite or tolerance. I put the two words there side by side, to being exposed to the risks of money laundering. Well, when I sit down with people inside financial service, well, people, we don't want to have anything to do with money laundering. We stay away from that. We don't accept any money laundering risk. And we have to get down to the details of having this conversation. And I found, particularly, as I said, in this last handful of years, really helping the people that I'm dealing with really understand what it is that we're talking about. So what is the risk of money laundering, right? Are we going to be accepting proceeds of crime? Are we going to be providing services to criminal organizations? Are we talking about the reputational risk if we get caught up in something like this? Often I see that there's usually, if I ask that question, there's none to little. And I'm saying usually, because some groups have figured this out well and they've figured out where they want to be, appetite for having any money laundering risk. I don't want to run a business that has any money laundering risk, right? I think for money laundering risk, the information, the data, remember we talked about needing to inform ourselves around the outcomes of this type of risk. It's less known, it's less understood. So there's a lot more uncertainty, and it's very reputational, right? Particularly in the financial services industry. So it's harder for the people leading an organization to accept any risk in this area because there's so much unknown. And most of the consequence is coming from the reputational risk. Like, what will my What will regulators, what will my partners, my affiliates, what will my customers think about this if I get caught up in this, like that reputational risk. There's also regulatory risk. If I get caught up in something like this, the regulator is going to come knocking. And then there's the reputational risk around the regulator focusing in on me, right?
Absolutely.
Let's see what I want to do.
I think if I may add, Jennifer, as well to it, I think a lot of time we have to also educate the business about the money laundering risk. I remember I had a client where they were saying that, oh, we don't have any money laundering risk in our organization. We are a brokerage firm. We don't accept cash. So we are only receiving money from financial institutions. And they fail to understand that, okay, they can be exposed to money laundering, but not specifically in placement stage. They can be in risk where the criminals are going to use the proceeds of fund in layering or integration stages. So I think a lot of that, it would be also for educating the board to understand, or the senior management to understand what exactly we mean by the risk of money laundering. And definitely the consequences of the reputation and everything is something very essential and very important for them.
I love this question. I love, I think we're all here because we love AML, but I love this. I love that the question includes the word brokerage. So in my career, I've got a couple of securities dealer, brokerage, securities industry clients who I've had the chance to work with for a long time. And so I've done a lot of learning, and I think, and there's some really smart people at these organizations. They've done a lot of learning. And this, that response that you've received of, no cash, everything comes from an FI, it's, like, let's just put that off the table. If I stand back as an AML professional who's been doing this in Canada, I've done lots of international work as well, but let's talk about what I know a bit more about. I think that the securities industry and real estate, by the way, are two industries, a lot of proceeds of crime, money laundering risk is in those industries, and we're not paying attention to it. And another way to say that is, as a society, we're tolerating a lot of risk within those industries. So this view, which I think is a bit simplistic of, I'm not involved in the placement stage, I don't touch cash, like, we have to get that off the table. And for me, I've struggled with this, and I think with different groups have struggled. There's a lot of proceeds of crime that never gets to cash, right? We live in an online world now. I mean, COVID has shown us that. So there's a lot of proceeds of crime that never get physically placed as cash in a system. So, if the first thing you want to tell me is you don't do cash, that helps me understand how I need to build to look. And with the securities industry, the brokerage industry in particular, I have seen a lot of money move on and offshore. And that goes for Canada, and I think that goes for many countries around the world, and that we have securities firms who are helping people move money on and offshore. And I've had the chance to challenge a few people, some of the very smart people in these roles, really important roles, who are trying to manage the money laundering. And the next slide talks about AML compliance risk. And I've asked them the question, okay, you're a brokerage, you don't deal in cash and but what's going on here? Like, what are these transactions that you're doing when a client says, okay, I want to put some more money into the account, and it's going to come from way over there in this other part of the world. And by the way, I had it in here for a while, and now I want to take the money out, and I want it, like, what's going on, right? Is it proceeds of drug crime and that kind of criminal activity? Maybe not. But we've had income tax evasion as a predicate offense for money laundering in, a growing list of countries around the world for quite a long time. And anyway, Suzanne, I could talk a lot about this, but I think that there is a lot of proceeds of crime, what meets the definition at a country level in these organizations, and we as AML professionals, we can't accept that no cash, and everything comes from a big FI institution. We can't accept that answer anymore. We got to push back and inform them about the risks of money laundering.
Absolutely.
And once those groups start to understand, and I think the best way to help them understand is giving them examples of what those consequences could look like. That's how they can be informed, or start to be informed, to understand what their tolerance and their appetite is for this. And I want to contrast that with AML compliance or regulatory risk, because I think the two are separate. And for the opportunity that I've seen is that when groups and mature compliance teams that are maturing what they do and how they do it within the entities that they serve, when they start to separate this out and understand, okay, look, maybe we do or don't have some appetite or tolerance to be involved in risks that could potentially identify money laundering. So, sorry, let me say that again. I think I'm seeing that there are businesses that do have some appetite to be involved in business where there's money laundering risk. Okay. They don't want to say that they do, but they do, because they're in that business. I'm going to hopefully make that make sense for this group by the time I get to the end of my slides. When we start talking about regulatory issues, this is much more known. There's a lot more information known about compliance risk. And because of that, I think we see better decision-making. We see better responses to, do we have any appetite or tolerance for this risk? Look at all those bullet points in the middle. Those bullet points are the kind of detail that a lot of the ones that I've worked with, OSFI, banking, financial institutions say, we have different levels of how we categorize issues in our compliance. We're willing to live with some of this kind of stuff up to a certain level. We don't want any major action, Jennifer, but we're not worried if, we have the second bullet, minor regulatory action. We're okay with that. We'll clean it up, but we're okay to live with some of that. We don't want any major action from a regulator. This is the third bullet. If there was an investigation or regulatory action that could be triggered, we don't really want that, but we don't want to spend too much money to do that. So there's a lot more information understood about the consequences of regulatory risk. So I think we see better decision-making and response to that kind of risk. Okay. Is there any question around those ones, Suzanne?
No, I think it's pretty obvious, and it's pretty to the point. I guess there's a lot of chats going on the chat box, and I'm waiting for the right moment, to ask.
Okay, I can't see all that. Well, hopefully some of this helps drive the discussion. So I've got a couple of scenarios here, and Suzanne, you'll have to keep me for the timing. I don't know if we can try to go through them a bit more efficiently, but what these scenarios are, let's have a read of this first one. Think about yourself as a regulated entity. Maybe you're in the compliance team of it, or maybe you're on the front lines, right? A customer walks into a branch location, wants to open up an account. Look, I've got a draft here. It's from a top 5 bank. No worries, right? It's from a highly regulated Canadian reputable financial institution. I wasn't happy with the service over there. I withdrew my funds, and now I want a new service relationship. I'm an older person. I'm a consultant in the oil and gas industry. Some information is found out on onboarding. He rents a downtown condominium, runs the business. Here's my driver's license. So is the organization, and I've used the word tolerance here because we're at a more specific level now. What do we think about opening this account? Is this no problem? Open it up, follow the rules, follow the KYC rules, follow the onboarding rules, follow the regulations that our regulator tells us. Okay.
Absolutely.
Think about that. See what comes through in the chat, Suzanne. But I think there's a lot of money laundering risk attached to this scenario. We've planted some in here. It's interesting. There's a couple of people I'm mentoring in a few programs right now, and we went through a similar type of situation to see if we could pick out all of the different money laundering red flags. Not this scenario, different one, but it was a good exercise to do. So just the fact that this individual has left, or they were exited from another financial institution, is a significant red flag for me. Somebody walking into our branch, and please know that this scenario happens all the time. I see it all the time. I see it when we go in and do reviews, when I talk to the compliance officers. We are seeing this happen in smaller Canadian financial institutions, and they are struggling to deal with this. And then they have a front line that says, okay, we want to onboard this customer. We got the money right away, no problem. The draft, there's no credit risk, like, let's go. And then the compliance team is right beside them saying, well, we there's a lot of risk here, right? And they're trying to make these risk tolerance appetite decisions right on the front lines. And if our people in the boardroom had done a better job, we might, providing, saying, what we will and will not do. So we've got a bank draft, which is, it's not a for sure, but it's pretty indicative to me that that person might have been exited. They didn't decide to leave. The institution might have kicked them out, right? So that tells us there's something going on over there, possibly, or something that we don't know, right? Risks that we don't know about. Do customers typically completely cash out their balances, or do they move funds electronically? The customer's running a consulting business, which presents, there is some risk. We don't know what activities or what kind of consulting they do, and they're running it out of a personal residence, right? We don't, that doesn't, it's hard to understand the profile of that business. Oil and gas industry can often involve international higher risk jurisdictions. Is further EDD required prior to onboarding this customer? I think further EDD is needed. I think the business needs to be researched. We've got to know about this business. Can we see some history of it? And I think I didn't put a dollar value for the draft there, kind of purposely. I think if it's a higher dollar amount, I'd want to be looking pretty closely at source of wealth around that. Like, why does this person, not just where did the money come from, a Canadian bank, but why does this person have ownership of that money? How did they earn that money? What is the source of the wealth? I think all of that's got to be explored in a lot more detail.
Makes sense. I think if we explore this scenario, from another perspective as well, is that I believe, since you mentioned that, oil and gas industry, not in specific in Canada, but other countries, and if he was based in another country, I would say that, because of his association or his work with oil and gas businesses, I believe that, there would be an association with government-owned entities, and majority of the oil and gas businesses, refineries, are state-owned entities. And there would be a potential as well for this client to be considered as a close associate of a PEP, which could be, the CEO of or a director of an oil refinery. And I believe that, that could be also, there might be a potential of risk for the client can be involved in money laundering of the proceeds of any corruptions. So that could be also another way of looking at this case.
I think for sure. So that industry was put in there specifically. You got it, Suzanne, that whether the industry is government state owned, whether the consultants' customers are or are not, that industry has to be highly connected to the governments everywhere around the world, because that's how that industry works, right? It's regulated, the pipelines, and so is this consultant, where's this money coming from? Is this consultant either, is money on one side or the other? And there's a lot of risk of corruption and bribery in those industries. So yeah, there's a lot in here that, leaving the front lines to just follow the AML, here's our identification requirements, here's our record keeping requirements, check the ID, bring them in, and kind of notes that document, well, the money came from a top 5 Canadian bank. I've seen that kind of write-up, by the way. We do see it. we have to dig deeper. We got to dig deeper into there. And as we start to bring these kind of examples forward and help the team of an organization who's supposed to be, whose job it is to understand, well, what is our tolerance? How do we figure this out? Do we want this kind of relationship or not? We've got to give them these details to help inform and make those decisions. So Suzanne, I'm going to keep going because we don't have too much more time left, right?
Yes, go ahead, please.
Okay, so scenario 2, let's take a look at this one. And this one gets that brokerage, that securities industry in here. So we've got, imagine you're in compliance working at those, some entity in the securities industry. We've had a week of activity, a number of large volume trades. We got 3 customers, Connie, Mark, and Thomas, all high net worth individuals, all considered really good clients of the firm, right? People, the kind of people we take care of. The trading involved 3 different stocks. You can try to follow it all around. It's not perfect. It's not meant to be perfect. But if you tried to follow it, you would see that Connie, Mark, and Thomas are buying and selling different mixes of these 3 different stocks. And it's not perfect. It's not meant to be, because it's real life is complicated, right? It's not perfect. If somebody's committing a fraud or, wash trading or, doing equal trading, they're buying and selling so that they're just moving the money around. It's not going to be perfect. It's not going to be a textbook example when we see it in real life. It's going to be complicated. The money that was used to buy these shares as it moved between these 3 people had been in the firm for a number of years. It had been sitting there for a while. They had them in maybe some cash or very low risk invested T-bills kind of stuff. So there hadn't been a lot of account activity until recently, until these shares started happening. Short time, wire transfers out to the same big Canadian bank. On a net basis, the profit loss was pretty minimal, so it was kind of a wash. Is this the kind of activity that we want at our firm? What is our tolerance to onboard this type of client? Okay. And these questions aren't simple. They're not meant to be simple. And again, I can't see the chat. I don't know if there's any interesting discussion going on, but there is risk here. We don't know for sure, but the potential, we're starting to inform ourselves by doing account reviews, by looking at what happened, that there's wash trading activity going on here. The 3 individuals are conducting some equal buys and sells. They're offsetting any loss or gain. The funds then are being transferred out. And maybe then it looks like to those banks that are receiving the money on the other end, that it looks like they made the money, doing some share investments over there. And when they took the money over to those financial institutions, they had a story to tell. The fact that the money's been sitting untouched for a period of time, it's a red flag of the funds. Maybe they were cooling off for a while, remaining hidden from other eyes. Transfers out, I don't know if you caught this, all the money was being transferred out to the same account. So 3 different clients, all the money going to 3 places, that's a big red flag. And I would suggest, and the compliance officer that we worked with on this one did decide to, this activity was written up and filed to FINTRACT, and the customers were demarketed out of a securities firm, okay? So the reason I'm sharing this example is, is there something that we could have known about? And I don't know that there was at the front end. What information did we have at the front end when we wanted to onboard these clients initially? I don't know that we had any money laundering risk information that we have now that would have informed that decision. But as time goes on and we look at how those individuals use the services of our firm, once this activity happened, is this helping us inform the decisions that we need to make that support our risk tolerance, risk appetite? And in this case that I pulled out of a real example with a client I'm working with, these customers were demarketed. Okay.
Great.
Okay. Let me try to go through this one quickly. Your company is approached by a lawyer who advises, he's representing a privately owned pizza chain. Pizza chain is looking to become a publicly traded company, is looking for your financial services firm. So this is maybe not the banking part of the firm, but the advisory part of the financial services firm, to assist them with an IPO, initial public offering. Some due diligence is conducted. You learn that the pizza cover jurisdictions. When questioned regarding the structure of the company, the lawyer advises that his law firm has structured the ownership of the pizza company to ensure maximum tax benefits for the owners. Please group, no. Even this week, I had the same question asked to me by somebody in the front lines of a very large credit union organization. It wasn't pizza, it was real estate. But our financial systems, particularly in Canada, I can only imagine other parts in the world, but I think that this might be a bit more acute in Canada, are being confronted with, you know, this is a good client. Look at what's here. Like, look at the opportunity for your firm to make money. Like, this is real business here. So whether there is some proceeds of organized crime, or we're just dealing with the potential for tax evasion, tax issues here, this is happening in Canada out of the real estate market, and compliance teams in some groups are really struggling with this. So what's the organization's tolerance to onboard this type of client? Your front line is saying, you know, this is this is great. This is the kind of one that I want. But as soon as compliant, you know, I have to help get this through the compliance, the high risk client group, it gets hard. So there's some red flags in here. These kinds of companies present an opportunity to launder funds that are cash-based businesses. That's the pizza. My very first case when I worked in the, actually it wasn't my first, it was my second case when I worked in the proceeds of crime unit, was a pizza group. And this organized group that was involved in drug trafficking with criminal biker gangs, it was very exciting for a forensic accountant. Was saying that they made all their money through a pizza shop operation, and the investigators were so upset, they were so frustrated. So I worked really closely with the officer, and I learned a lot. And we talked and I flyer, and we got all of the details of the pizza boxes that had been bought by the pizza chain. And not that many pizza boxes had been bought. And then I did the forensic accounting on if, you know, the clients had ordered, you know, super extra large, every single topping you could imagine on top of the pizza. Here's how much money that they made, because they only delivered. They didn't have any sit down pizza, and it was nowhere near the amount of money that they had in the place. So it was very interesting. So we've got we have a cash-based business here that might be going on. The pizza chain's corporate structure is multi-layered, and we've got high-risk jurisdictions. Does that make any sense to us, right? Like, what's going on there? So there needs to be increased due diligence prior to agreeing to accept this client. The true owners of the organization need to be identified to ensure they're not connected to organized crime. And I think that we've got the potential for tax issues there. Okay.
Just in case.
Okay, so Suzanne, what I'm going to do is I've got two slides in here, but I'm going to flip through them because I really want to get to this slide right here and have a few minutes, and then have a bit of time for questions if we can. What I want to bring around for the group is that as we work better by informing ourselves and educating on the money laundering risk, as well as and separately to the compliance regulatory list, to those people who lead the organizations, our leaders. It's their job to set the appetites, the tolerance levels, make those decisions, you know, set the tracks for us so that we can then build the detailed programs that are going to support the business. I mean, that's what we're doing, right? As we do that, we can better, as AML professionals, build the right response to those tolerance levels. So yes, we need the appetite first, but then tolerance as we get specific. And what I've got on this slide right here is, if we understood that our exposure to money laundering risk was very low. I have none. I run a business, maybe I run a small credit union, or I'm the type of bank. Look, I don't want to be involved in any of that kind of risk. You've informed me more about it. You know, we've gone through these different types of scenarios. Like, I just don't want to touch any of that. I understand that I wouldn't, that if we did identify something that was money laundering, we would stop right away. We would do all the right things. We could exit the client. We could report to our regular, but I actually don't ever want to have to deal with that. So I'm really low. So what does that mean for my compliance regime? So I think that means that we need to have an AML program that, so this is the left-hand side of that, of this slide in front of us, the lower tolerance column. It means then we're not going to accept high-risk clients. It means then when Jennifer and the GT team come in and say, show me your list of high-risk clients, you're going to say, I don't have any high-risk clients. And by the way, I can show you why I don't have high-risk clients, because we don't onboard them. And I'll show you all the times I said, no, 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 no. It means that the occupation and the source of funds of the clients that we do deal with are easily understood, they're expected, and they're known to be lower risk. So we're in the details now of really understanding this, right? It means that the transactions with clients might be controlled, and we might have specific limits on what clients can and can't do with us. So we're the AML regime and how it integrates with the operations of what we deliver as a regulated entity are going to be you know, pretty closely entwined. And the controls we are going to have controls that, if I say it this way, it's the bold at the bottom there, is if I have a lower tolerance for risk, my controls are going to be at the front door, because I don't want that risk coming into my organization in the first place. So I need really strong controls at the front door, the front door of the barn, of the house, right? And I'm going to really make sure that it doesn't come in. So my processes, my understanding of risk at the front door, my response to when it happens, like, it's got to be really strong. It's got to be good. Now, if I'm in an organization, and there's lots of these, by the way, there's a whole bunch of them. I think it's the whole industry across Canada, if not the whole financial services industry across the world. Organizations have some tolerance for money laundering risk. No one wants to actually facilitate money laundering, but they have some tolerance to get close to risk, because they do onboard high-risk clients, right? We're on the right-hand side of the slide. We do have high-risk clients. We do let them in at the door, right? We bring them in. We do have products and services that are international in nature, that connect to different types of services. We allow it, we do it. So what does that mean for my AML compliance regime? It means, okay, I've let them in at the door. I got to do all the right things. I need to make sure that I'm meeting all of the regulatory requirements. But in terms of the controls that I need to build in my AML regime to meet the risk tolerance level that we've set, because I don't want to be involved in money laundering, right? But I've let risk in the door. So my monitoring, my automated monitoring, and maybe you've got manual monitoring as well, the kind of monitoring and the looking for when risk might happen has to be significantly different to me as a reviewer on the higher risk tolerance than the lower. So if I go into that organization on the left-hand side of the screen and they show me, look, we don't let risk in. And yes, of course we do some monitoring, but we don't need so much because we really keep it out at the front doors. The organization on the right-hand side, they let risk in. Well, I expect their monitoring program. If you tell me you onboard high-risk clients, I am expecting a much more rigorous, in-tuned, highly calibrated, and you're all over it all the time, monitoring system to catch risk when it happens so you can do the right things, okay? And I think I've had a chance to take this kind of discussion a few times now over the last few years to senior groups. And look, we've all been learning, we're all in a journey, programs are maturing. When they start to understand this, organization B, the one on the right-hand side, invests more money in their monitoring systems. And organization A, the one on the left-hand side, if I got my lower tolerance one, they can invest more money at the front door, which might be training their people, their agents. Look, this is what we accept, this is what we don't. And it helps them make better decisions about how to respond to risks so that their tolerance level, they get to where they want to be. Okay, let me stop there and see how we go, because I think we're coming up on time. This is my last slide. So I'm in your hands now, Suzanne. I hope that was helpful.
That was perfect. Thank you so much, Jennifer. A lot of great information, a lot of great cases. Thanks for sharing those with us, Jennifer. I think I'm gonna start with a couple of questions that we had on the audience, and as well, I have some for you. Um, I think, specifically in relation to this slide, and also in the boardroom, when the board wants to set the risk tolerance and appetite, what kind of question do you think that we as AML professionals, we can ask them to direct them, to set the right level of risk? What do you think that, we can do, to make sure that we are getting into the right tolerance or appetite?
Well, I think the first thing for me that I'd like to share is it takes time. And what I mean by that is that boardroom, that group, that senior governor, whichever team it is this isn't something that you kind of, have one meeting and it's done. It's ongoing, and you need to take care of it regularly. And for me, where I've had some success, and again, it's not, you don't do it and then you're done and it's figured out. Things change, life evolves, you have to keep at this. The start of the conversation, and then where we get to, it's there's got to be a lot of trust in those groups. So there's a lot of relationship building with those teams. And then once you get to that, I think having the conversations, the kind of thing that I've tried to do with the group today, and helping them, we pull examples from their industry peer groups, but the ones that have the most relevance and the most engaged response with those teams, I found, is when the examples are real from their organization. So if I can take two clients, for example, and say, look, you have this kind of client and you have this kind of client. And I think, by the way, that our big banks and, more mature groups are doing this regularly. So this is maybe more for a lot of the smaller groups that are still maturing. If we can show them, look, you've got a program that is designed to monitor about 10% of the clients, because you are onboarding some really high risk stuff. Is that what you want to do? Maybe if you said no to that and your program was supporting the other 90%, like actually taking them to the details, but we have to do it in a very intelligent, informed way. We got to do our homework as AML professionals. We got to line it up for them. So I don't know if I exactly answered your question, but it's taking informed, real, and personal to the entity. It's going right back to our first slide. What is risk? Informing them about the risk that is of the organization itself.
Absolutely. That was a great point. No, I totally agree with that. I think another question that I believe, it can also put everything into perspective, is that how can we incorporate the risk tolerance and appetite with our risk-based approach?
So this is, it's funny. I was on a session on Wednesday with talking about all the new regulatory changes that are coming. And, we still have this risk-based approach. And a few people said, or we had a discussion, is this really on paper now? Like, are we really able to be risk-based when we have so many prescriptive details and rules? And I think, so please know I tend to be a pretty optimistic, positive kind of person, and I'll forge ahead. I'm not afraid to do that, but I think we still do have the opportunity for a risk-based approach. And even though there's a lot of detailed rules, we still do have, when you think about, what is mandated as a high risk client in Canada, at least, the regulatory mandate is not a very long list. So in our risk-based approach, we still have an opportunity to decide, number one, whether or not we're going to deal with those high risk clients. We get to choose that. And if we do get involved, and we start and we understand what the industry tells us, what our knowledge tells us, this is high risk. Our risk-based approach, it's in the details, Suzanne. I'm not answering this question, but it's in the details. We get to decide are we going to take that risk on or not? And if we do take on the risk, then we have to have the right response to it. And I think that it's actually what I'm trying to show on this slide. So if we do accept risk, then we have to respond to that risk. That is what the risk-based approach is, right? So how can we do that? If the question is, if we understand our tolerance, how do we understand the risk-based approach? Like they work together, right? So the better we understand our tolerance for risk, then we must have the right response to that risk. We don't get to have less of a response to that risk. They work together.
Makes sense. Yeah, absolutely. That makes total sense. I think I'm gonna pose the last question, which Mondu shared with us. He's asking Jennifer, are we ever going to litigate the money laundering and terrorism financing risk of gatekeepers? Is there hope that they might eventually become reporting entities?
So who are you talking about? Are you talking about the lawyers and the accountants? There are a few other gatekeepers, but they tend to be the usual suspects, right? So, I'm a partner in an accounting firm. Let me talk first about the lawyers. The lawyers are privilege is still sacrosanct, I was told just this week in Canada. But the provincial law societies in Canada, at least, are moving to push closer to some of the regulated requirements, particularly around the record keeping and the record keeping around identification and the movement of the money. But I don't think we'll get close to the reporting in Canada. I think that line is going to hold. With accounting firms, I'm really challenged as an accountant myself and a partner in a firm to deliver on this. It's very interesting to me to understand better through years of working how our regulatory environment was drafted. And accounting firms are regulated entities. We're on the list. We have to do all of these things. But when you get into the details, we always have to inform ourselves of the details. There's a whole lot of stuff that's carved out. So I've recently spent time, actually very real, it's very live right now at my firm, working with our senior leaders to say, okay, well, actually, even though we're regulated, we don't have to do very much, because that's the truth, that's the law. There's more we want to do because of the reputational risks. So forget about the regulation risk. There's more that we want to do because we got a whole lot of high-risk clients, right? We service a whole lot of groups. So what are we going to do there? So I don't know that the regulations will change, but I do think, here's maybe my, nice closing. I do think, and the whole time I've done this, that our tolerance level as a society, as people who live in this world, as people who live, and maybe it's a bit generational, and now work in this world, our tolerance level, I think tolerance is a better word than appetite, for letting illegal stuff in our environment is dropping fast. We're not okay with it anymore, and we actually want to shut it down. We want to shut it down, right? Like we saw, such engagement and movement forward on things like Project Protect and the anti-human trafficking. I see more of that kind of thinking coming to. So it means that an account choosing to do more. We need more businesses, and we need more business leaders to do that. And so that's some of us, right? That's us as AML compliance leaders. We need to inform our people around us, not just about the regulatory risk. Be clear on that. Get all of that done. Take care of your house. But you need to inform about the money laundering risk and help drive these businesses to make good decisions. It's hard.
That was a great closing, Jennifer. Thank you so much. It was a lovely session. We have everyone, thanking you on the chat box. So it was wonderful as usual. We know that you're a legend here, and
I don't feel like a legend.
Thank you so much for sharing your insight, information, and great experience, with us. This is a lovely topic, and I hope that we can have another further discussion and go into more details about the risk. And thank you everyone for joining us and staying up for this session today. Hope everyone enjoyed the long weekend, and we will see you next week. We have another session next week, so we'll look forward to seeing you. Take care.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Suzanne, and the whole community, the whole group. Really appreciate it, your time.
Same here. Thank you, Jennifer. Have an awesome weekend, everyone. See you. Bye for now.